places in this world where laughter feels like a crime. In the freezing winter of 1993, Steven Spielberg was trapped in one of those places. He was filming the darkest chapter of human history, and it was slowly breaking his spirit. But every night, at exactly the same time, the phone in his hotel room would ring, and the man on the other end of the line was a clown who was secretly crying. Krakow, Poland, 1993. The air was thick with the ghosts of the past. Steven Spielberg had arrived to film Schindler's List, a project he had avoided for 10 years. He knew it would be difficult, but nothing could have prepared him for the crushing psychological weight of recreating the Holocaust. He wasn't filming on a comfortable Hollywood soundstage. He was standing on the actual frozen earth of Poland, just outside the gates of Auschwitz. During the day, Steven stood in the freezing mud, surrounded by hundreds of extras shivering in thin striped uniforms. Every time he looked through the camera lens, he didn't see actors. He saw history staring back at him. He saw the faces of the millions who never came home. When the director yelled, "Cut!" there was no relief. The horror didn't stop when the cameras stopped rolling. The trauma seeped into Steven's bones. He stopped eating. He couldn't sleep. The world had turned entirely black and white, stripped of all its joy and all its hope and all its color. The crew stayed in a small, drafty hotel nearby. At the front desk worked an elderly Polish woman named Anya. Anya didn't speak a word of English. She didn't know much about American movies, and she certainly didn't care about Hollywood fame. But Anya was a survivor. She had been a little girl in Poland during the war. She knew what the darkness looked like. Every evening she watched the famous American director walk through the lobby. His shoulders were slumped, his eyes vacant. Anya recognized that look. It was the look of a man carrying the weight of 1,000,000 unquiet souls. He would nod politely to her. Go up the creaking stairs to room 301. Close the heavy oak door. And then absolute silence. Anya worried about the man in 301 because she knew the silence that leaked from underneath his door was the kind of silence that slowly eats a man alive. Thousands of miles away, in the bright sun-drenched hills of San Francisco, another man was fighting a brutal battle of his own. Robin Williams was on the set of Mrs. Doubtfire. By day, he was a whirlwind of pure, untamed energy. He spent 4 agonizing hours every morning in the makeup chair, being covered in heavy latex, transforming into a 60-year-old British nanny. He bounced off walls, improvised wildly, and made the entire crew roar with laughter. But when the cameras stopped and the crew went home, Robin would retreat to his lonely trailer. He would stare into the mirror, slowly peeling away the heavy latex mask, revealing a man who was deeply, profoundly exhausted. Robin battled his own severe depression. He knew intimately what the dark felt like. He knew the terrifying weight of a quiet room. And he knew, through the news and industry whispers, that his dear friend Steven was currently drowning in that exact same darkness in Poland. Robin knew Steven wouldn't ask for help. Men in the dark rarely do. So despite his own bone-crushing exhaustion, Robin would look at the clock on his dressing room wall. He would calculate the 9-hour time difference to Krakow. He took a deep, shaky breath, forced his tired facial muscles into a wide smile, and picked up the telephone. It was 2 a.m. in Poland. The switchboard on Anya's desk buzzed loudly, breaking the dead silence of the lobby. An international call from California. Anya plugged the heavy brass wire into the board and connected the line to room 301. Upstairs, the heavy black rotary phone next to Steven's bed began to ring. It rang once, twice. Steven stared at it from the edge of his bed. He didn't want to answer. He didn't want to talk to studio executives about budgets or schedules. He was too hollowed out to speak. Finally, Stephen picked up the heavy receiver. "Hello?" he whispered, his voice cracking. Instead of a studio executive, a manic, booming, completely absurd voice exploded through the earpiece. It was Robin. But Robin didn't say, "Hi, Stephen, how are you?" He didn't ask if Stephen was okay. He knew Stephen wasn't okay. Empathy doesn't ask obvious questions. Empathy takes action. Without taking a single breath, Robin launched into 15 solid minutes of pure, unscripted, absolute comedic insanity. He didn't perform his usual stand-up. He crafted an exclusive, surreal world just for Stephen. Through the crackling international wire, Robin became a Russian politician trying to order a pizza in deep space. Then, he instantly morphed into a Scottish golf pro who was secretly a rabbi. He threw an invisible, chaotic, spectacular parade right through the telephone line, down in the lobby. Anya was wiping the front desk with a cloth when she heard a sound she had never heard in that cold building before. It was coming from the floor above, from room 301. It was laughter, not a polite chuckle, but deep, genuine, breathless, healing laughter. The kind of laugh that shakes the dust off the rafters. Anya stopped wiping the desk. She looked up at the ceiling. She didn't speak English. She didn't know who was on the phone. But in that moment, tears welled up in her tired eyes and she smiled. She realized someone across the ocean had just thrown a glowing lifeline into the dark. This wasn't a one-time event. It became a sacred ritual. Stephen later called these phone calls his comedy care packages. Once a week, precisely when the trauma of the Holocaust set became too heavy to bear, precisely when Stephen felt he couldn't take another single day of the sorrow, the phone would ring. Anya came to expect it. At 2 a.m., she would sit by the switchboard, her hand hovering over the cables, waiting for the magical call from California. She felt like she was part of a secret rescue mission. And what about Robin? Robin never once asked for anything in return. He never complained about his own grueling schedule. He would perform his brilliant, exhausting routine to an audience of one. Listen intently to his friend laugh until he cried. And then, right at the peak of the joy, Robin would abruptly hang up. Click. Leaving the room, leaving Stephen's soul, feeling just a little bit lighter. Months passed. The freezing winter slowly turned to a bitter spring. Finally, the filming of Schindler's List came to an end. On Stephen's last night in the hotel, the phone rang one last time. Anya connected the call, knowing it was the end of their silent routine. This time, there were no Russian accents. There were no Scottish rabbis. Through the static of the line, Robin's real voice, quiet, gentle, and utterly sincere, came through. "You did it, brother," Robin said softly. "You survived the dark. Now come home." Stephen held the receiver tight, tears streaming down his face, and whispered, "I couldn't have done it without you, Robin." Schindler's List went on to become one of the most profoundly important masterpieces in cinematic history. It won 7 Academy Awards, including Best Director for Steven Spielberg. He had survived the darkest period of his career, not just through his own artistic genius, but because a friend refused to let him sink. Years later, when the world lost Robin Williams in a tragic, heartbreaking wave of sorrow, Steven Spielberg didn't just mourn the loss of a great comedian. He mourned the loss of the man who threw him a rope when he was drowning. When we look back at Robin Williams, we remember the blockbuster movies, the manic energy, the unparalleled genius on stage. But perhaps his absolute greatest performance of all was the one nobody saw. A tired, broken man, sitting alone in a dressing room in California, pouring his own fading light into a telephone receiver, just to keep his friend alive in the cold Polish winter. Robin taught us the most beautiful lesson of all. Sometimes, the people who carry the heaviest, darkest burdens are the ones fighting the absolute hardest to make sure others don't have to. If you have a friend who is sitting in the dark right now, don't wait for them to ask for help. Pick up the phone, be their light, be their Robin. If this story touched your heart today, please subscribe to our community, share your thoughts below, and help us remember the unparalleled heart of Robin Williams. Take care of each other, and we will see you in the next story.